going on, Knicks fans? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Cap Rules Everything Around Me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills, y'all. My name is Jeremy Cohen. It's very good to be back. Appreciate Andrew and Benji hopping on the pod a couple days ago to record with John. Of course, we were aiming to have cap or no cap for you. Fortunately, over the last few weeks, my health has not been great. Finally got my voice back. Wasn't able to speak for about 5 days. So we're rocking and rolling. I'm going to try to take it easy and ease my way back into things. But, I was talking with Andrew today. Woke up feeling good enough to do an episode here. We'll get an episode of Cap or No Cap going soon. So it was very frustrating not be able to record for you all. And I appreciate how much people resonate with the content that we provide. So thank you so much for your patience. Appreciate it. Figured we might as well get things rolling. So, a lot of exciting stuff. Obviously, the Knicks have been in the off-season mode for a couple weeks now, and it's a really nice feeling to not have, I know I've said it, but it's true, to not have 2 months or even what feels like a month and a half between the season ending and the draft weighing on you. You can kind of just cram all of the crap into about a month, give or take. So it's great. It's a lot less stress, a lot less talking in the abstract, fewer chaotic trades lasting longer. So, but excited to hear yours. Yours are all great. No shade on yours. Everyone else's is a different story. But very excited to talk about the Knicks offseason, get some thoughts. As usual, always happy to express where I'm at. There are going to be some things where I do have some cap or no caps coming up. I don't want to necessarily expose some thoughts here or there, but I'd love to answer your questions to the best of my abilities. Anything that I just feel like I can't, I'll plead the fifth to the best of my ability. We'll try this out tonight. Hopefully everything still goes well and I'm able to speak. Still some discomfort, but it's like it's game 7. You gotta suit up in some capacity. Although if I suited up like OG did a couple days ago, it would have turned out exactly like OG game 7. So I guess the one thought that I usually have before diving into your questions, something that's been on my mind recently. It's kind of funny when you're not able to really talk physically, and when you can't or you just don't have the energy or the health to even tweet, you still read. You get a lot of the information. And I know there is a large fascination with the idea of moving Mitchell Robinson and moving him this offseason. And like with any player, you say, well, if there's a good deal out there, it'd be wise not to evaluate it. And the Knicks should. They should evaluate every single trade option that comes their way, and they should be considering other options themselves proactively. But with Mitchell Robinson, I think the main thought that I've had is, well, when you look across the league, there aren't a lot of teams that employ centers who don't play with one another earning double-digit salaries and more. And it happens, right? I mean, it's happening in Atlanta next season. But of course, Atlanta won the first overall pick. So if they go with Alex Sarr in the draft, you have to imagine they move Capella. So that problem goes away. The Pelicans did that this year, where Jonas Valanciunas and Larry Nance Jr., they never really played together. They were both earning double-digit salaries, but it seems like Valanciunas on his way out. The Magic, they've got Jonathan Isaac and Wendell Carter Jr. They don't really play together, both earning double-digit salaries. Of course, the Magic have an insurance play with Jonathan Isaac, where if he were hurt, they could pull the plug pretty quickly. And there's another organization as well that, of course, is slipping my mind at the moment that has players, actually Portland, but they're a losing team. So it's hard to find a team where they're winning and they have centers that don't play together earning over $10 million. Now, that would be an argument towards moving one, as Isaiah Hartenstein, presuming he stays with the Knicks, will be lining up for quite a nice pay increase. The max he can get would be around 16.2 if memory serves. So the thought here is, well, why employ both? And the reason is because you can. If there's no pressing reason not to, then it's worth it. But there is the school of thought, of course, where as good as Mitchell Robinson is, you wonder what his value is on the market. And now rim runners, even really good defensive ones, in a vacuum, don't carry a whole lot of value. Like the idea of moving up with Memphis to get the 9th pick and involving pick compensation of your own, that's great in theory. I love it. In reality, we just don't see players, centers, who don't space the floor command quite that type of level of return. And then when you factor in the fact that Mitch just, I mean, is the term injury prone applicable to him? When you look at the track record over the last few seasons, it's hard not to feel like there is some level of concern there, of course. And so it's all right. Are you trading the 9th pick and the 7 to 8 years of cost controlled service for this level of player? And of course, there's a little bit more to the deal. I'm not saying it's in a vacuum, just 9 for Mitch. There's salary, there's other portions of it, but it doesn't feel like something that flows, that connects. And I think pretty much everyone on the roster, except Jalen Brunson, is available, should be available. Of course, it's also easy to point to the Nova players and see that they're not likely to be going anywhere. But I don't think utilizing Mitch, shipping him out, is the best course of action right now. That really was the thing that stood out to me the most. And there are things that can fluctuate. Obviously, it's not just dependent on that. But I think the main thing that the Knicks need to do this offseason is they need their depth. Obviously, they need to bring back OG Anunoby, Isaiah Hartenstein. But looking back on it, their depth, and Ian Begley even talked about it today, where apparently there's internal concern over how many players are injured and all of that. I mean, it's a worry. And the good news is that the Knicks have picks. They have assets at their disposal. There are ways for them to be able to get better as a team without even doing a ton. There's not a sizable move that necessarily has to push them from where they were at to where they could go. I mean, if we're talking about not enough internal depth, we're saying that, yeah, the Knicks couldn't rely on their 9th, 10th, 11th man quite in the way that they'd like to this year. Well, there's a way for them to retain pretty much everyone and still add talent to the team. Do I think that that level of talent, the marginal type of players, are going to see a ton of time? Could. Depends on where the Knicks are lacking. I have ideas in mind. I will be elaborating them as time moves forward. But that's essentially it, where I think you want to look for coverage for your coverage, not moving out players and kind of, it wouldn't be fair to say rearranging the deck chairs of the Titanic because this isn't a sinking ship, but you want to just add to your core. You don't necessarily want to trade for it, but again, so many different opportunities and ways that we go about it. And I'm sure that those of you who are participating tonight in real time have ideas. So without further ado, I've got my man Andrew on the production side. As always, he's got my back. Andrew, if we've got questions, got comments, I'm happy to receive them. And here we are, Andrew P. Hi, Jeremy. I'm curious if you pay attention to Sam Presti's pressers, and if yes, what you learn from them. I will be candid. Sam Presti, last year, I believe he spoke for 2.5 hours. I think he did a similar time. I don't really have that time. Even this week, while incapacitated, I did not sit down to watch the Sam Presti press conferences. I appreciated the Gordon Hayward quotes that were floating around, just in terms of accountability and acceptance. And it's great. I think it's a nice insight into how someone builds a team. I'm a fan of Presti's. Got the chance to meet him for 5 seconds at a KFS interaction when we went down to watch the Thunder game. He's a very nice guy. But in terms of watching and learning, I think it's he's a great public speaker. He knows how to cater to the media. Nothing wrong with that. But in terms of learning, I think a lot of it really stems from, with all of these executives, it's what you do as opposed to what you say. And he says a lot of great stuff, and he clearly did some great stuff considering how the Thunder were the number 1 seed. And, I felt all year, Chris and I were talking about this, that the Thunder they needed that 1 year of growth. Even though they got the 1 seed, they needed that experience of getting their asses kind of handed to them in the playoffs, and it will benefit them in the long run. And I fervently believe that with the assets that they have at their disposal, picks, the cap space, bet on internal development, they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a really great team. How they go from this point to the next one, not sure. But unfortunately, I did not pay super close attention to the presser. I'm sure he spoke well, like I said, but wasn't on the radar, unfortunately. Kevin Danishevsky, thank you for the super chat, Kevin. How is Mikal coming to the Knicks? Kevin, I knew you were going to ask a Mikal question. You even tweeted about it. I get it. I will happily talk more about that, not this upcoming cap or no cap, but likely the one after that. But the facts are the facts in that it's very tough, of course, to believe that the Nets and the Knicks will make this level of trade. I don't know if the Nets and the Knicks are the best trade partners when it comes to getting Mikal Bridges. There are clearly other teams that have a desire to get him. There's on the one hand saying they'll never make a trade. On the other hand, you could look at it by saying, well, if you thought that the Raptors and the Knicks would never make a trade while there's an ongoing lawsuit, well, they did. So it's hard to say never, but are there going to be more teams that are just absolutely interested in Bridges in a way that he makes more sense there than he does on the Knicks? It's very possible. So I promise you it will be covered. I will work on it to cover in length for all parties, but especially for you, Kevin, as I know this is something near and dear to your heart, something that we have talked about online and offline as well. So I will do it the service that I feel it is deserving. It can't be tonight, unfortunately. But thank you, Kevin. Darren Hood. Hey, Jeremy, I have a question. Which realistic move would you see the Knicks doing, whether draft night or a day before the draft? So I presume this has to do with trading up or trading scenarios. If we're talking about the draft, it comes down to, the Knicks have 3 picks, 24, 25, and 38. Is there a player that they covet to such a degree that they'd be willing to trade up? If they do, how does that impact their balance sheet? Obviously, OG Anunoby, he's going to need more money. Isaiah Hartenstein, he will need more money. What's the decision on Bojan Bogdanovic? He's got 19 plus million that could be decided, or $2 million dead money cap hit. How does trading up, which means a higher salary for that rookie scale player, impact all the other moves? Are you going to be hard capped? If you are going to be hard capped at the first apron, for example, how does that impact what you're doing? Are you giving out unlikely bonuses? You've already got $750,000 in unlikely bonuses for Dante DiVincenzo. You have to account for that. At no point can you eclipse that hard cap if you've triggered it. So it's a lot. And it's almost like if you're the Knicks, you have to move backwards, right? All these teams should presumably be working backwards anyway. But if you think about from the Knicks side, and of course they have more intel than we do, if they say, well, if we're able to retain Isaiah Hartenstein for the max, and well, if we can keep OG Anunoby at X amount, then it gives us Y amount to play with. And from there, we could allocate that money here, there, and call it a day. Of course, it also depends on which teams in the draft are willing to trade. You could look at Phoenix as a team that needs a lot of roster seats to be filled. But also, I saw 24 and 25 for 22 being floated out there as a trade. It's not a good trade for the Knicks. We've seen last year when the Pacers and the Wizards made a trade with each other for 7 and 8, the cost was for less than that. So it really doesn't have to be quite that high. It could be something else. But a team like the Suns, James Jones doesn't make second round picks. It's just not something that he's really done. He's treated second round picks like crap. He just doesn't really care about it. Is that something that's really going to interest them, or are they going to go out and prefer a veteran who they feel can win now for around the same price? It might be slightly more, but you trust a player for the veteran minimum versus the second round rookie exception. Say it's cap hit wise a little over $1 million. Like, if you're Phoenix, you probably trust the veteran more because you've got a veteran core of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, and presumably Royce O'Neal, who's walked himself into a very nice situation. It's always nice to go to a team that cannot afford to lose you as you hit unrestricted free agency. So in terms of a deal, yeah, I mean, I'm very much open to the Knicks trading up if there's a player that they love. That should go without saying for any team, but I don't see why the Knicks need 3 draft picks. You could put one of them on the 2-way, and it's like, great. Well, would that asset be better used moving up, similar to how the Knicks moved 27 and 38, if memory serves, in 2020 to get up to 23. And then when they didn't get Tyrese Maxey and they moved back to 25 and recouped a little bit more, they got Emmanuel quickly. So there's a lot of moving up and down. If there's one team that I expect to be the most chaotic on draft night, it has to be the Knicks. I don't think it's anywhere close considering the track record in 2020, 2021, 2022, and I guess you could say 2023, even though they didn't make a pick and they didn't have one entering draft night anyway. So yeah, Darren, I think realistically they can move up a few spots. It's just a matter of targeting which team financially is in the right position where they want to take it on. Because if you moved up, again, just as the example, if you had 22 for 24 and 25, which I again feel is a trade that disadvantages the Knicks, you're saying to Phoenix as well, you get 2 picks, but also the scale of these salaries is actually more expensive than if you just stuck at 22. So how does that come into play for a team that's already dealing with apron issues and a bloated payroll? It may not be something that appeals to them. So you'd want to find teams, maybe they're cap space teams, maybe they're teams that are just, are going to likely to finish below the apron. If they're hard capped, it doesn't really matter. I'm talking about the first apron. It's just finding that right partner to dance with. And I have no doubt the Knicks will search for that. I think they can find one, but it's, there are also a lot of teams in that range that just may not want to trade with the Knicks. Eastern Conference foes that just have no desire to help the Knicks out and don't see the benefit in getting other assets. And then how do you want to tackle future picks? Do you want to invest future draft pick capital into moving up into this draft? Well, if you feel like you found your guy, it's hard for me to say no, but there's also a limit to it because those future picks could be used to trade into future drafts, or they could be used to help you get some sort of star or premier win now talent. And how many of those players is Tibbs really going to be comfortable deploying? I mean, Quentin Grimes wasn't used for a while. Deuce McBride really only saw time when COVID restrictions in the league, where that was the most amount of players that the NBA has ever seen. So I don't expect anyone drafted to see time from the jump. I don't think it'd be the best investment, and I don't see Tibbs doing it. But thank you, Darren. Good question. Reverend John Ortiz. Hey, John. Thank you for the super chat. Glad to have you back, Jeremy. # let's go Knicks. Well, it's very good to be back. Again, you don't know how much you miss your own voice, even if you hate hearing yourself, which I don't hate hearing myself. I grew up acting. Like, you get used to your voice. It happens. But when you can't speak, when you sound like Evan Turner, with all due respect to Evan Turner, for a few days, you kind of yearn to hear what you naturally sound like again. So thank you, John. Appreciate it. Chris Bernhard. Quick question, Jeremy. Do you see the Knicks using the contracts of Bogey/Mitch in order to improve the team? So I start off with Mitch. Again, not saying no by any stretch of the imagination. Just depends on the deal. But I don't think that, like, if you were to use Mitch in a trade, the hypothetical trade that I think makes the most sense is using him as good salary filler. And my concern on the bogey angle, and we'll get more into this into the cap or no cap, which a lot of it will have been discussed. John did a really nice job of tackling a lot of the salary cap minutia. Fred Katz has done a good job with it as well. There have been other content creators who have done a great job. Not going to be first, which is okay, but I'll certainly do my best to add context to the situation, fill in any gaps as well, maybe repeat some information, but that's okay. Let it sink in. I don't know how good of a good salary filler Bojan Bogdanovic at 35 coming off of multiple surgeries is, and the restrictions that he has. Now, yes, if you guarantee his salary, there's a world where you could have a high payroll and not deal with the first tax apron or the first luxury, the first apron. And that's great. But also you're spending north of that. Is that something the Knicks are comfortable doing? Keep in mind that the Knicks have not paid the tax in any of the 4 seasons that Leon Rose has overseen this team. Do I believe that changes this year? I do. I believe that the Knicks are a tax team this year. Do I believe they're a first apron team? I would be surprised, but I'm not going to rule it out. We'll have a more elaborate conversation with Mr. Macri coming up pretty soon. But yes, the Knicks could use those contracts, but it's also like, do you hang on to them in the off chance that you could make the moves in the trade deadline? Or do you get rid of Bogdanovic and open up the mid-level exception? Because then that creates other doors for you. But if you're doing that, who are you signing? Who do you want? Who fits with what you're doing? What does the free agent class look like? All of those things, which we'll go through all of them this month, I promise you. So I could see the Knicks doing it, but I don't know if that's the best path. I, in fact, would hesitate to wonder if it is the best path to use either of them as flotsam. And I think it's all about learning, right? Like most of us, know more about this world than, and I'm not even on a macro level, like the world, sure, yeah, but even from the NBA level and salaries and everything, you keep evolving. There was a time where I thought that Evan Fournier's salary was going to be much more helpful in a trade than it was. And that was a great learning experience for me, because what it taught me was, well, there's something with having money, and there's something with having good money, and then there's something with having bad money. And I didn't think that Evan Fournier's salary was necessarily bad money, but it certainly wasn't good money. And it's taught me, okay, try to harness the good money, because you can add picks and try to make sweeteners, but it's better than having bad money is having good money. If you can find it in other forms, do it. You don't have to just cling to Bogdanovic and the fact that, it's a $2 million cap hit, which again, you could also, you could stretch that money if you wanted to, depending on how it would be. It'd be over the course of 3 years. It'd be $666,667 this year. It'd be the same amount the next year. And the year after that, it'd be the same amount minus $1. If you're very close to certain tax aprons, you probably want to eat it this year. Just take the $2 million if that's the direction you want to go. But there are options here. So I'd say if you can look at Bogdanovic and be like, good player, probably not worth that amount. May not even be worth holding on to him for a break in case of emergency because of the financial position, where even though you're not hard capped at the first apron, you're still spending a lot, which the Knicks may not want to do, and all of that. It's a lot. It's also a lot to consider the moves that are impacting the following season, the 2025-26 season, because of course the Knicks are going to continue to keep their eyes on the horizon for stars, but they're also going to help their depth and not take too much away from that. And they're also going to want to not hard cap themselves in a way that restricts them further. So it's a lot to take in. Totally get it. Chris, it was a quick question. I know this was a longer answer. I don't see them this year necessarily as being avenues to improve the team, as they wouldn't be my priorities, but that's not to say that they cannot be used whatsoever to bring something of value back. I'm a little bit more skeptical about Bojan because of the age, because of the injuries. The shot, incredible, but also the defense, crap. Like it's he's a known commodity. I think it's a better asset than if you were to just have had that Fournier salary, which of course the Knicks received Bogdanovich for the Fournier in that transaction. But I can't sit here and say that it's going to leapfrog them in a way where perhaps they're better off having the mid-level exception. But thank you for that question. Juanon, thank you for the super chat. Jonathan Isaac, am I crazy? I expect the Magic to pick up his option, but my God, would he look great for 25 minutes per game for Tibbs? Let's say iHeart takes the money, sign and trade, bogey contract, and picks. Hashtag fire Tibbs. I get the Jonathan Isaac appeal from the defensive side, right? My larger concerns, of course, you'd have to evaluate the offensive rebounding. I need to take a closer look in terms of what his offensive rebounding numbers are, but then there's the health factor. If it's sign and trade, it's a little bit harder. The CBA's new rules kind of made it a little bit more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's harder to facilitate a sign and trade. I think for a team like the Knicks, it's going to be a lot, I want to say less likely, because again, they could still presumably do something with a sign and trade, but in terms of it's the bogey contract and picks. The Knicks would be sending out, I presume, more money than not, which is good, but also you're acquiring Isaac. You're going to want to have to pay him again next year, and this goes to the philosophy of, okay, then you have Mitch for another year. My biggest concern would be you don't have a healthy center that you can rely on who's seasoned, right? If your center rotation is Jonathan Isaac and Mitchell Robinson, I fear there will be a lot of Jericho Sims minutes in the near future. And that doesn't excite me very much. I'm sorry, Jericho. Our beautiful horse boy. It's just not the way that I think it's the best path to succeeding. So I would imagine if I'm Orlando, keeping the majority of my core, keeping Isaac, and looking probably to package him instead for guard help, that makes more sense to me if I'm Orlando. From the Knicks' perspective, yeah, and he had a great season. I mean, I'm pretty sure he finished ahead of iHeart for defensive EPM. He's incredibly talented when healthy. We also, and this is something that often gets overlooked, and I don't blame people for overlooking it, culture. Jonathan Isaac's eccentric from public perception. Don't know him personally. I don't know if those values translate quite in the same way from Central Florida as they might in New York with this team. May not even matter, but there you can tell that there is a deeper connection on a personal level. Of course, I know this question is assuming iHeart were to leave, but I just don't know how these players get along. A lot of them don't necessarily have red flags. Jonathan Isaac, I just don't know if he's going to mesh. That's something that I can't help shake. But I appreciate the super chat contribution and the question. Dave Y. Question. Heard that we'll be a second apron team if we keep OG at $35 million, iHeart at $16 to $17 million, and guarantee Bogey's deal. What are your thoughts on that? And would that apron spurn us to let someone go? Thank you. So I'm going to, I'm always ready. I've actually got this pulled up here right now. If the Knicks were to give exactly $35 million, as Dave says, to OG Anunoby, guarantee Bojan Bogdanovich's contract, and have Isaiah Hartenstein earning his max on the Knicks, which would be, as mentioned, 16.2 million, 16.178962, if we want to be specific. Of course, this is including other salaries the Knicks have as well, fixed costs, and it's also including the 2 first-round draft picks that they have. They would be over the first apron, but they would not be over the second apron. So they would not be a second apron team. But the Knicks, just doing these 3 moves and nothing else, have not done anything to trigger the hard cap, right? So if they haven't done anything to trigger the hard cap, it doesn't necessarily prevent them from doing certain things. With that said, if there were a larger move that opened up, it might be a factor. it is good to have more money from the outgoing standpoint, but also it's got to be good money. John wrote a compelling case for Karl-Anthony Towns in terms of if you get more money in the door and if it's that level of talent and you have excess money, then you could trade for a star and you don't have to worry about the aggregate situation. And he's right. All of that is correct. I personally view it similar to how I targeted LaVine last year with Booker. But looking back, again, talk about things we've learned. Number one, Dante DiVincenzo was not nearly as good as he wasn't even on the Knicks. Number two, the rules of the CBA really hadn't quite clicked in yet to understand, this is more on me, exactly what the issue was. Number three, LaVine hadn't been hurt. That's a serious factor. I wouldn't do that again. At that moment in time, I think you could make an argument. It wasn't my favorite argument, but it was one that I thought, yeah, maybe it's compelling enough. I wouldn't do it now. But it also, to go back to what John was saying, it impacts, everything makes an impact, right? It's a domino effect, and you have to best prepare yourself. And I think the best way you prepare yourself is just by not going into the first apron this season and staying under the second apron next season. And if you do that and still have good talent and you're able to win with the players you have, then you're in great shape. And if a star does happen to become available, you have the ability to strike. But you do want to offer mixing and matching, because in John's case, he talked about Giannis. We don't know if the Bucks want Giannis. We don't know if the Bucks want Cat. There's a very compelling argument that perhaps they don't. And just Cat with picks, that might not be an appealing package to them. They might want something different. So the workaround with that is, as John said, you don't have to aggregate, but maybe the Knicks want to aggregate. Maybe it's better for them to aggregate. Perhaps if they have a roster entering the season, this upcoming one, similar to that of entering the 2021-22 season, which, as we know, was not a good year. The Knicks disappointed that year, but the benefit was they were stacked in terms of depth. It was just unfortunate because Derrick Rose injured. Mitchell Robinson, I believe, missed most of that season, if I'm getting my years correct. It just wasn't, the team wasn't shaped in the way that the Knicks this front office clearly wants them to go. So I'd say, Dave, if you do all of those things, you're still under that second tax apron. I know Fanspo, for those of you trade machine, is saying the Knicks are a second apron team. I don't quite understand exactly how they're getting there unless it's the cap holds and assumptions that they're making. It's a great resource. It's unfortunate that you can't renounce certain cap holds and non-guarantee Bogdanovich if you wanted to, that sort of thing. It's kind of just assumed, but not giving you the choice. And Spot Track's great, but Spot Track has shifted away from a lot of their customizable features. It's mostly just trades. I think they're just getting back to it now. But it's tough. It's hard to play around with these numbers if you don't have your own spreadsheet. Fortunately, I've built my own thing. It's very Knicks-centric, which is great for Knicks fans like yourselves and like myself. So rest assured, though, with the outline you laid out, not a second apron team, nothing to worry about in that moment. They would be over the first apron, though, which is a potential cause for concern, something we'll elaborate on more, certainly as the offseason continues. Fern Rodriguez, thank you for the super chat contribution, Fern. Bring me Donovan. If you can get Mitchell and just give up a ton of picks, McBride and other salary due to maybe Mitchell putting some pressure to get to New York, do it and make it work somehow. Okay, so let's evaluate this from the Cavs side. Yes, in a world for the Knicks where it's just matching salary and picks and boom, Donovan Mitchell, it's great. But if you're Cleveland, is that what you want? Is that what you're looking for? Donovan Mitchell's in this fascinating position, which is that he wields some of the biggest power in the NBA. Like, if you think about it, if you think about the stars and who's able to make demands, it's obviously LeBron, because he's going to opt out and he's able to leverage the Lakers in some way. Say, you know what? I didn't ask to come to Cleveland, but I have power and I'm going to use it and I want to use it. And there's such a fascinating situation because we'll see, of course, where their head coach is, and I'm sure they'll all want to be in alignment. But Donovan Mitchell can make this team how he sees it fit largely. He's not running the team, but he has a lot of say because all he has to do is say, I don't want to be here, and he can walk. Now, maybe the Cavs call his bluff, but until he signs a contract, he has leverage. And the most important thing about leverage is knowing how and when to use it. And I think we've already started to see that. We've seen reports that if JB Bickerstaff had stayed, it would have been harder for Donovan Mitchell to stay. I don't fault folks who want Donovan Mitchell on the Knicks. I don't necessarily want Donovan Mitchell on the Knicks. My opinion on that was pretty consistent back in 2022, where it was, look, if you can get him for a great deal, obviously go for it. But I had my questions. I had my qualms. A lot can be said of, right, there's a smaller backcourt. And I am the type of fan from a basketball standpoint of how you build your roster, where I do believe size and length, wingspan, all of that, very important. If you add Donovan Mitchell, who's an incredibly talented player, the most common argument I have heard, because a lot of folks have wanted to talk to me about this, I understand why, is, well, you've got OG Anunoby to cover for them. Because Donovan Mitchell's not a slouch on defense either. He's got a long wingspan, but he's smaller. And my response to that is, well, what if you had OG Anunoby not have to cover for anyone? What if you were so strong in the defensive end around Jalen Brunson, who takes all those charges? He's no slouch on defense, despite his size and physical limitations. What if OG were just able to do OG things and not have to cover anyone else's tracks? And also, if we're just calling a spade, OG Anunoby misses time. What happens to the Knicks defense when OG Anunoby isn't playing? What coverage do you have if you're the Knicks to mask any OG absence and also try to suture any bleeding that comes through from that smaller backcourt? And that's the thing. You could look at the scoring, you could look at the talent, all of that, and I won't say that you're wrong and the Knicks are dumb for doing that. Hardly. It's really just about preference, personal preference. For me, he's on the smaller side, but I don't think it really matters. I think that he's the type of person who, and I can say this not knowing him at all, but he's comfortable being the guy in Cleveland, building a team, how he wants to be built, saying who he's comfortable with, all of that. And this is a league where oftentimes people don't admit their mistakes easily. It's really hard to do. I think the best case example, Matt Ishbia bought a team and decided to tell everyone how smart he is, and it's not looking good. And a major reason why I don't see Devin Booker breaking free, certainly not this offseason, and probably not even the next one, is how many billionaires do you know that say, you know what, I messed up and I should change course? I think they'd rather go down with the ship and blame other reasons than actually look inwards and say, perhaps I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm just the person who should be signing these checks. And when it comes to the Cavs, if they took an offer that was less than for Donovan Mitchell than they paid 2 years ago, even if we're just restoring their picks, it's a huge mark on them, on their abilities. I don't know how many teams are comfortable saying, we screwed up, it's fine, let's just move on. Ironically, the Knicks do it a decent amount. Cam Reddish deal didn't pan out. Held on to him for a while, and then they moved him. But so the Knicks haven't made a large-scale move that has hurt them so much where it's, at least I don't believe so, where it's been completely problematic. They usually find their way out of it. So I get it. I understand the desire. Don't fault you for, or anyone else who really wants Donovan Mitchell. It's not where I would look. I would look in other directions. I also just don't think Cleveland goes in that way. but you never know with the NBA. Thank you for the super chat contribution. Julian, hey Jeremy, welcome back. Quick question. What would you think about bringing Fultz off the bench for defense and some playmaking? Fultz, I've always felt, is not New York material. The reason I say that is based on Tanking to the Top by Aaron Weitzman. If memory serves, it was in his great book, talking about how he's never really been a big city guy. He's been more of a kind of smaller scale area. I mean, we know how Philly worked out. It was not great. I think he's probably found his niche in a more easier type of living environment. So I don't see him, and people change, right? Attitudes, interests, everything. You can change a lot as a person compared to when you're 19 versus or 20 and now in your mid 20s. But just given like how they would bring him off the bench. Okay. So it'd be non-guaranteeing Bogdanovich, and then you're probably giving Fultz the full mid-level exception. It's $12.859 million if memory serves. That's a decent chunk of change. I'd probably rather get Bogdanovich guaranteed and then ship him out for someone else, but I wouldn't want to necessarily do that either. That's not my strongest preference. So I like the creativity, but I just don't know if he's the best fit. Another thing to consider, the Knicks really do love players who shoot a lot of threes. It's never really been Fultz's game. So I don't think that would help them with their overarching fit. But I like the creativity. Kev Words. Oh, Kev, thank you. Appreciate the super chat contribution, man. Hey, Jeremy, what are your top 3 targets in the mid-level and biannual exceptions, if not already discussed? I'm late to the show. Oh, man, Kev, I've got a whole thing on this. So, well, I'll answer part of this, and I'll try to give you as much as I can because this was incredibly generous of you. The biannual exceptions. It's not a whole lot of money. It's, I believe, less than $5 million. You can only use it once every other year. Not a lot of players that are worth that amount. And you could split it up. So it's usually kind of more of like a last resource for teams. So it would impact how the Knicks operate. It hurt them at the first apron. So not quite sure on that. The mid-level exception. What I will say about this is last year, I did a cap or no cap on the mid-level exception. And we walked through like 5 years of history of examples of players that worked, examples of players that did not work. A lot of teams use the mid-level exception foolishly. Now, I think we could argue the Knicks used the mid-level exception on Dante DiVincenzo, and it's paid off pretty well. He was one of the best shooters in the NBA last year. So if I were to be targeting someone in that range with the mid-level, again, without saying too much, I'd be interested in someone who I feel is a competent shooter, who I believe could not be older than 30 because it just time kind of ages, and fills an area of need that you desperately have. Now, the good news, which makes the exercise even more fun to talk about in cap or no cap form, is that the mid-level exception starting this year can also be used as a trade exception. So it doesn't just have to be free agents, which gives us an entire crop of new players to be able to evaluate. How fun is that? But Kev, appreciate super chat contribution. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for it. Excited to tackle it more soon as well. Debo, thank you for the super chat contribution. Which teams do you think will/should be sellers that the Knicks could get involved with to solve the depth issue or weaponize the bogey contract? It's a good question, Debo. I'm actually going to bring up the list of teams right now and just thinking through. So who will be sellers? I mean, there's an argument that Atlanta could do it, but how much does Atlanta want to sell, considering San Antonio owns the rights to their pick next year? How does that change with Trae Young or DeJounte Murray? We know the Spurs want to win right away, which I think is a great idea. You know, if the Spurs want to try to win games, Wemby's going to be terrifying next year. They should do it. They should absolutely do it. Push their chips forward. I applaud them for not slow doing the rebuild. I know you can look at the Cavs and LeBron and how that worked out. Assets that the Spurs do. And also, the Spurs didn't have to tank for quite too long. And even the Mavs, who, they were too good once Luka was acquired, right? That was the leading thought. Well, they're doing all right now, and they're about to play in the NBA Finals. I could see Washington selling off some of those pieces because of the fact that that front office is pretty new. They didn't draft a lot of those players. They received someone like Jordan Poole, who I'm not advising to go to the Knicks, but they didn't want him. It's the cost of doing business to get him away. We've talked about Brooklyn. There's some players that would certainly fit with the Knicks. How willing the Knicks and the Nets are to make a trade, not quite sure. Detroit has a lot of players on the fringes. I'm fascinated by what they do this year. I think also we're going to see that Detroit Pistons pick, which I'm sure a lot of fans have already written off, start to gain some steam in terms of value. It's a very valuable pick if you're willing to hold on to it for another 2 years, which conveniently I believe the Knicks can, but also if they use it in a trade for a star, then so be it. That's great. Done. The value is clearly shown. Portland is a lot of young I skipped Charlotte. Charlotte is an interesting case study because I think they're closer than people might think. I don't know if they'll be a good team, but I could see them being a play-in team next year. It depends on LaMelo Ball, of course. Can't stay healthy. But I don't know if there are a lot of players where it makes sense for them and the Knicks to make a trade. Similar could be said with Portland. Toronto, I don't think it happens again. Memphis, they've got depth pieces, but they're not depth pieces that the Knicks would covet. Utah, I don't think that there's any real traction there. You could argue Jordan Clarkson. I still think it's not a coincidence that, no pun intended here, that the Knicks kept looking at targets allegedly at the point guard spot who were on expiring contracts, going back to Cameron Payne when they talked about potentially flipping Fournier in that offseason trade last year, if you remember that. Similar could be said of getting Alec Burks, clearly a free agent. So I don't know really how many other teams are trying to sell and make sense. Parity is so good this year that a lot of teams I feel like are going to go for it. There's no one player that stands out where I'm like, got to get him. That makes the most sense. Do it. Who also fits with the Knicks and their plan. But it's not to say that the Knicks should ignore it. I'm sure they'll make the calls. I'm very curious as well, as John and Fred talked about, if the Knicks can push back with Bogey's agreement. The deadline for when the non-guarantee comes into place, wouldn't see anything wrong with it. At the end of the day, I would gather it stays exactly where it is because I still have my hesitations on whether he is here or not. I'm leaning more towards the side that he isn't, but it's a good question, Debo. So thank you very much for that and a super chat contribution. Soul Squad, thank you for the super chat contribution as well. Would a bogey and pick 25 for Jonathan Isaac and pick 18 work cap-wise? Wouldn't have to re-sign Precious. Can draft Terrence Shannon for bench scoring. I will lean on Chris, who I thought did a really great job with Dream last night. I enjoyed watching it live. In terms of with this trade, yeah, that's a legal trade. The way that would most likely work, I mean, not to say, depending on how the money shakes out, it probably could work on draft night. I would just want to dot my I's and cross my T's. Dot my I's, cross my T's. Brain's still working. Before saying like, yeah, it could absolutely work this draft. It sounds like it would because the Knicks would be sending $20 million out, and Jonathan Isaac makes less than that, and certain rules, and the Knicks are closer to the hard cap for this season that hasn't ended yet than the Magic are. But even next season, you could still do it. It would cut a little bit into the Magic's cap space. So it's a sort of thing where they'd probably want to bring all of their cap space money in and then do this type of move when they're over the salary cap. The Knicks, in this case, wouldn't be signing pick 25 to a contract. It would just be draft rights. The same would be said of the Magic and pick 18. So it's just swapping draft rights. No money is exchanged there. It would really just be bogey for Jonathan Isaac. The Knicks are not hard capping themselves because they're sending out more money than having coming in. The Magic would be hard capping themselves, but they're also probably so far away from the first apron that it doesn't matter. So if we're talking purely from a can this happen standpoint, the answer, Soul Squad, is yes. This is something that could happen. And one more from Soul Squad. Knicks draft Edey and Terrence Shannon. Thoughts? Again, I still have more draft research that I want to do. I want to do a draft cap or no cap to the best of my abilities. It's going to take time as I keep sorting through those things. Someone like Chris has done the work. I want him to get his moments to shine. So I would defer to him on whatever he thinks in those moments. There are a couple thoughts I do have of the draft that are well-researched, but I'm going to save those. Would hate to spoil a cap or no cap. But thank you for the Super Chat contributions. Stoic J, what do you think about the Lauri trade talk? First of all, came from a reporter who, I'll just be honest, doesn't have the strongest of track records. It's hard for me to feel comfortable with a lot of what's said. Just my opinion. In terms of Lauri Markkanen himself, I'll talk a little bit more on the next cap or no cap, but the gist of it is I like him. No denying the talent. On a cheap contract, he'll be earning 2.5 times that the following year, which isn't necessarily a problem. But again, things add up. You got to focus on the cost control factors. Some things I think get overlooked with Lauri, and I'm not saying this is his fault, just things to consider. Hasn't played in the playoffs. Again, not his fault, but there's something to be said of wanting known quantities. And I think that gets overlooked a lot with Lauri. And one more time, not his fault, but it's a factor to consider. The other thing, Scott Perry did a really great job of talking about positionless basketball on the offensive side, but then there's the positionless on the defensive side. And from a matchup standpoint, I do worry that Lauri doesn't really target one area of the defense extremely well. Now, I know XJ, Mensa, those guys love Lauri Markkanen. They could speak far more competently because they've watched him more than I have. But these are kind of general reservations where I just don't think it's the best fit. Also, I don't trust Danny Ainge, and I don't blame you if you don't either, because he's an excellent businessman. He did a great job with the return for Rudy Gobert. Excellent job, of course, with Donovan Mitchell one. I just don't. It's tough to trade with people that you don't trust when it's that high stakes. And from Utah's perspective, you're giving them the opportunity to tank and keep their pick for the next couple of years. It's top 10 protected. But also, they have to win their back page. They need to feel like they won the trade too. So you're probably paying hand over fist. Even if you're trading Julius, got a lot of picks going out. My biggest worry, just to sum it all up with Lauri Markkanen, is the value going out far exceeding the value coming in. I like him a lot. There's no denying the talent. It's getting from here to here. I just don't think it's, they're a Lauri Markkanen away. And others see it differently, and I respect that, and I understand it. I've never felt the same kinship and appreciation that they share for him. But he's a great facilitator. Hell of a player. Jordan Bub, thank you for the super chat contribution, Jordan. What is Jeremy's perfect and most realistic Knicks offseason in your own opinion, and explain your reasoning for it? Jordan, I promise you, this will be answered. And I hate the fact that you put your hardworking money towards this question only for me to say I plead the fifth, because I have to. Because if I did, then it would spoil all the fun and all of the research and PowerPoints, all of it. Just up in smoke because of your great question. I can't do that to the people. I'm sorry. I can't do that to myself. I can't do that to you. It'd be putting you at a disservice. We got to tease it out. We got too much time to fill. It's June 5th. Draft isn't for another 3 weeks. We got to do something here. So it's a fantastic question. I'm flattered. I appreciate it. So I apologize again that I'm not answering it, but it just it'd be spoiling too much. So thank you. Kevin Danishevsky, again, thank you for the super chat contribution, sir. Is Tari Eason a fit? What's his price? I like Eason. I do. He does fit a lot of the metrics. He checks off the right boxes. Biggest question comes down to efficiency. The way that I see it, so Josh Hart, obviously his shooting was present in the playoffs, and you hope that it hangs over. But we know that Julius Randle has gravity, not exactly the best shooter. If you introduce Tari Eason, someone who, and you can look at the three-point shooting and be like, oh, he's fine. I don't believe it's off of a great number of attempts. And I still worry about the efficiency and the finishing. He's the type of player where I feel like if you had a team of great shooters but needed the Josh Hart grit, but didn't have Josh Hart, then Tari Eason would make a hell of a lot of sense. But as currently constructed, I don't think he's the best option. I think if you're the Knicks, where you really want to keep looking is identifying players who are capable catch and shoot over the last however many years. And it's a tough list to find, right? What do you define as minimum threshold where it's a good amount of shots being taken? How old do these players need to be? Are you trading for them? Are they free agents? How easily attainable are they? Do they fit? Do they want to come to New York at all? Because they have a say in this oftentimes, especially if they're free agents. Are they restricted free agents? Are they unrestricted free agents? So many factors that go into it. His price, tough for me to say. I would view Eason, if I'm the Rockets, as a good young prospect to include in a trade for a consolidation piece. Like if you wanted to consolidate some of your assets to get individual talent that fits exactly what you're going for, that's where I think Eason has most of his value. It's hard to find these younger guys who are on rookie scale contracts, who are good, who are on the up, getting fair value for them in a vacuum, not super easy. Right? Like, do I think he would have more value right now than Cam Reddish did when the Knicks acquired him from Atlanta? I do. But also, does that behoove the Rockets, who have plenty of picks of their own? Does it? I just don't know who it helps. So I think his price is more contingent upon the weight of other players and him balancing out the value that way. But I know you're a fan of Eason's, Kevin. I appreciate the super chat, so thank you. Busy, what's going on, Busy? Appreciate your super chat. Favorite KFS member? Come on, we're all great. We all do good stuff, but I'm flattered. Thank you. No, I'm not saying this to get a discount on my ticket for KFS at the Garden event next year. It's all good. We'll put that $5 towards your deposit. DeMar DeRozan bench thoughts. So if I'm DeMar DeRozan, and Busy said, whoever producing, can you clarify my question? Wondering if DeMar DeRozan takes a pay cut, maybe $25 million, and we package Mitch and Bogey for DiVincenzo and maybe Drummond. That would be a double sign and trade. Can't effectively happen. In terms of the money, I would just say rule it out. It just for everyone's sake, from the headaches involved of sign and trade math, it's so difficult. If I'm DeMar DeRozan, I'm sorry, DiVincenzo. Is what Andrew is telling me. Well, why would it be? Wait, did I say DiVincenzo? I apologize if I did. No, it is. It's DeMar DeRozan. Yeah. Okay. Too many. Not going to say too many double D's. That never mind. We're going off the rails already. For DeMar DeRozan, if you were to have him on this team, there's no doubting the level of talent. Shout out to Foreplay. Thank you, Andrew. There's no doubting the talent. It's really more about how exactly it fits. Again, you're talking about a player who I believe is 35 years old, still has game, still a hooper, but does he hoop the way the Knicks hoop? You know, he's never been a high quantity threes per game player. It's just not his world. His office is the mid-range. He's lethal from there. I don't believe that the Knicks are going to switch up their style to accommodate DeRozan. So the only way to bring him in would be that paycheck, or pay cut, I should say. So is he signing for the mid-level exception? If I'm Chicago, I'm pretty much stuck. I think that they are one of the most perplexing franchises in the NBA. But here we are. And if you're Chicago, you almost need to overpay him to bring him back. And if everything goes sideways, you could trade him mid-season and get something of value. So they're almost tethered to each other. Obviously, if Paul George throws a wrench, the Clippers could try to do something, but he'd have to take a pay cut there. A whole lot of chaos involved. So I just don't think that DeRozan as a Knick fits with what's being said, right? Like, you can talk about the bench scoring. I also have questions, of course, with the fit with Julius Randle. OG Anunoby is not a 2. DeRozan's not a 2. You're basically bringing in 3 guys capable of how their games operate, a little bit methodical, less finesse, kind of bruisers. I just don't think it fits well. And DeMar DeRozan coming off the bench versus he'd be starting in Chicago, he'd be starting in other places. They'd have to adjust so much to accommodate for DeRozan's needs. And at what point is it worth it? Great player. I mean, I saw something online where it was like DeRozan might get to 30,000 points. I don't think he'll get that high. I think you have to accommodate for or account for the time and what happens to players' bodies. And if he does get to 30K, that's testament to his hard work and talent. But I just I don't see it in the cards, Busy. I don't see it happening here in New York. It doesn't seem to be their play style. So apologies for throwing cold water on that. Andrew P. Appreciate your super chat contribution. How likely Caruso is available? Ultimate Tibbs guy. If I'm Chicago, I don't really want to trade him. I just don't. I get why you would, but it's the sort of thing where I think Chicago's best path forward, make a good draft pick this year, see how next year goes, and sell off some pieces at the deadline if you're treading water. Of course, it's run by Jerry Reinsdorf, who in the Bulls they sell out every game. Their sellout streak is incredible. The fans in Chicago, they turn out no matter what. But I mean, if I'm them, of course they have to pay Caruso. He's extension eligible. If they want to do that, he's entitled for 140% raise off of this year's current salary, where he's earning a little under 10 million. So I don't know if he'll be available. We'll certainly talk about him when we talk more about other options and rotation pieces. He's very much the ultimate Tibbs guy in terms of the defensive side. He can hit some corner threes, but I don't think the numbers show great talent there. His catch and shoot is fine overall. Wouldn't object. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know if he's like the guy, especially as he enters his 30s, that you covet. He kind of feels like, well, if it were a few years ago, then you hang on to him, but I don't know if it's about trading for him. But it's a very valid question, and I'm happy to keep exploring that Caruso question as we keep going through the offseason. And Junon, appreciate super chat contribution. Once again, 3 names I'm watching. I wouldn't be surprised to see in your cap or no cap: Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, and Denny Avdia. I will say that there is one of those names that stands out, another name that I have pondered, and another that I am less inclined to believe makes sense. I will let you, Juanon, and the folks at home make your best guesses on exactly who fits into what bucket, but they're all in some capacity worth evaluating if I feel inclined, which we'll see where the cap or no cap takes me. Only one of them is 98% done. Pulling Natasha Bedingfield. The rest is still unwritten. So I believe, oh, no, we've got one more. Even appreciate sneaking into the buzzer. OG team, thank you for super chat. Will we get PowerPoint on the cap situations? Will we get power? Of course we will get PowerPoints. I will give the people what they deserve. I love doing these cap or no caps. Love doing these episodes of C.R.E.A.M. They're always fun. It's a blast to be able to share my ideas. I'm always flattered that people think highly enough that they want to care about it, you know? But here you are. Here I am. It's appreciated. We'll make it work. But there will absolutely be cap or no caps coming up. My one wish were that it had preceded this one, but health decided that was not meant to be. So for all those tuning in tonight, and anyone listening to this to fill their days tomorrow, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the KFS podcast feed, please leave a 5-star rating and review. My thanks, as always, to Andrew for the 1s and 2s. I would not be up here. I literally wouldn't. I mean, not to dox you out here, Andrew, but I didn't get the link until like 5 minutes before this. And I was like, are we going to record? We having a pod? I hope so. I'm ready. Let's do it. But we did, because Andrew always comes through. So does Kev. Got a great production team. Got a great team as a whole. So thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll be back soon. I promise. You'll hear a cap or no cap. We'll go into depth on some great topics. Always happy to do these. Always inspired by your thoughts, questions, and your care. Be well. Stay safe. And let's have a great NBA Finals. I'm a hater of both of these teams. Great storylines for me to hate on no matter what. I guess I'm pulling for the Mavs. I will go with Mavs in 6. You know, there was a time, I'll say it fully. During the trade deadline, I thought the Mavs made a terrible deal. Straight up. And then more news came out about what that trade looked like. And I was a little bit more comfortable with it, but I didn't like it. And that was because I was being a hater. And that is because I usually hate in silence, and I let other people carry out my agendas for me, which is great. But when I was live, it was like, no, it's a terrible move. It was wrong. The Mavs are great. They've got some energy for it. When I was fortunate enough to go to the Nuggets Mavs game, which wound up being the game of the regular season, I feel like that sheer coincidence, which was great. There was an energy in that building that you could feel, and this is going to be a lot of fun. The narratives, it's a great story, but hopefully it's even better ball. And again, there are going to be players that on both sides of these squads that I'm not fans of, and one side will go home sad, and the other I'll just have to live with them being happy. But I've got Mavs in 6. That's my pick. Probably more hater driven. But, you know, I got to stick to my guns. I got to do what I got to do. Thank you all. And until next time, be well.